Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We're back with another In Context. Today is December 28th, 2025. We figured today we'll shine a light on Latin America, in particular what U.S. is doing there. Venezuela, Colombia, Honduras, these are in the news a lot. Let's start with Venezuela, sir.
The US has been making a lot of fuss about Venezuela since Trump came to office. There are different grounds for this. So occasionally or initially, the grounds for this was immigration. Trump claims that Venezuela is threatening the US by smuggling mentally disturbed and criminals from Venezuelan jails and asylums to the US to corrupt the US and destroy the US. This is an old Trump racist mania that he started actually in 2015 with it. It was back then on Mexico and to the racist European Mexico or Venezuela are all colored and all the same thing. I don't think they distinguish them. Anyway, this time around, however, he started with Venezuela, and we are going to throw them away, which didn't work because they didn't do their homework and the laws they used didn't make sense. He was trying to use a law from 1798 to eject citizens of countries at war with the US, and Venezuela is not at war with the US. And the courts told him, "You're crazy." Anyway, so the next excuse now came as well. Actually, they are exporting drugs to us. Problem with that: A, Venezuela doesn't grow cocaine. Venezuela doesn't manufacture fentanyl. And yes, there is a lot of drug trade in Venezuela, but it's about trade from Colombia going to Europe. So the US is not even concerned. The drugs that come to the US come from Colombia and Mexico, and that's actually what the US government says. So the story doesn't even add up. Then the latest now is no, it's about oil. That's what the Propaganda Times, formerly known as the New York Times, said today. Problem with that is, well, US companies have been in Venezuela since forever, since they started discovering oil. And the oil there is not easy to extract. It requires technology. The US has had Venezuela under sanctions forever. And as a result, although their national oil company used to be quite significant, it's quite degraded now and it can't do it on its own. They need American companies. So that's why Chevron is still working and exporting oil while Trump is threatening war and blockade and nonsense. It's still working. So the problem with all of this is it just doesn't make sense. The more rational point actually is not just Venezuela. It's Venezuela and Colombia and Honduras and Mexico and all the way to Argentina. The US looks at Latin America as its backyard. And while the US policy in China, for example, is considered foreign policy that should be managed by the State Department, this is actually, if you look at the bureaucracy, you can see it. The management of relationships with Latin America comes through the Homeland Security and Interior departments. So it doesn't, you just need to look facts in the eye. To the US, all of Latin America is just, as I said, domestic policy. And the thing that people don't realize about Latin America, those who just read about Latin America when it's in the news, not when it's off cycle, is all of Latin America has so long been dominated by the US that the whole political class in Latin America thinks of the US as an evil that will always exist because geography cannot be handled otherwise. And all that means is you have to find a way to accommodate it. So all of the political class in Latin America actually is looking to ways to placate the US. As a result, they are embedded in domestic US policy. So there are people preferred by the Democratic Party in Latin America. There are people preferred by the Republican Party. When the Republicans come, if the bad luck of the Democrat guys is they are in government in Latin America, the US pushes them off. The Democrats come back and it reverses. You could see that in Haiti, for example. The Democrats come and the Republican team is off. The Republicans come and the Democrat team is off. It used to be like that in Mexico, but lately the US decided that, well, actually, Mexico can be left to stabilize and we can do business with the same party by both Democrats and Republicans. But in the rest of Latin America, it's just like that. The latest and most ridiculous is they had elections in Honduras, and the elections was essentially a match of who can win Trump's blessings. So both leading candidates, their campaign was in Florida about who can present himself as the preferred candidate of Trump. Trump eventually anointed one of them, and that resulted in him winning with few, 25,000 after he was expected to lose. Previously, in the same place, Honduras, the president woke up in the morning, found himself outside the country. They kidnapped him and threw him outside the country. And then the Supreme Court said, yes, that's legal, that's fine. This is not really a state. It's, gangs. The gangs are legalizing their fights. Now the president came back, and the Democrats were fine with him coming back, and his wife is the current president, who is about to give office to the new Asfora thing. But the point is, Democrats come, they push their guys. Republicans come, they push their guys, and on it goes, off it goes. It's they play with people's lives and existence.
Would you argue that the Middle East is like that now too?
No.
Hmm.
It's foreign policy.
It is foreign policy, but the control that the United States is wielding there, it's almost like you said last time. The players there have all conceded, okay, we cannot function without placating to the United States.
It's getting there, but it
Yeah.
takes time. This has been going on in Latin America for more than 100 years.
Yes.
So there is a difference of, colonialism over time destroys societies.
Yes.
It doesn't just destroy it starts by destroying the political and moneyed elite, then it destroys the social fabric itself. So Latin America has been dominated by the US so long that it has destroyed the structure of society. The whole place is disturbed, especially the places that the US has been enmeshed in, which is Central America. The only exceptions, as I'll mention explicitly, are the larger countries, and that's Mexico and Brazil, which are rather stable and within limits. So the US just manages them from a distance, but that's about it.
Yes, I think that for the most part, the U.S. foreign policy as you said, in Latin America is actually U.S. domestic policy, and the stuff with Venezuela is interesting. I think the strategy currently, this naval blockade or whatever they're doing, from what I've been reading, the aim of this is to basically bankrupt not just Venezuela but also Cuba, because Cuba really relies on Venezuelan oil shipments and whatnot. So, indeed, this is sort of this is clearly a war over oil. Everyone knows that Venezuela is not sending drugs to the United States. Fentanyl, whatever, cocaine is all coming through Colombia and Mexico. And it's really just sort of, in my opinion, it's Trump just demonstrating that he can do whatever he wants because he's the boss. I don't think he gives a damn about any of these places, to be honest. There's probably people in the State Department that have a vested interest in this for their own personal reasons, but I really think this is I know everyone likes to talk about the Epstein files, distraction, and whatnot, but I really think this does fit into that larger calculus somewhere. This is clearly, if they really want to stop the sorts of drugs, they would go elsewhere to do so. It's just about shock and awe. Pete Hegseth and these guys looking like they're doing something when they blow up these ships that supposedly have drugs on it. And it's all smoke and mirrors for a regime that has really failed to enact any real meaningful long-term policy. I read that Congress passed 35 bills this year, the worst output they've ever had. Something insanely low. They control the House and the Senate and the presidency, and they were almost able to pass nothing. Virtually no bills got passed. And the thing about executive orders or whatever these things Trump is always issuing is they can always be overturned by whoever comes next, like on the instantly. Legislation's passed through Congress is the only thing that really has secure chance to like survive. But other than this ridiculous big beautiful bill, whatever this BBB bill, the reconciliation bill that was passed, which also was a struggle. These guys didn't pass anything, despite controlling all three chambers, all three, branches of the government. So I think that when you have a failing domestic policy, when you see inflation and so stagflation or whatever we want to call it right now, the reality is people are not doing well, and these are all just distractions. I think to get people to not realize that their health insurance premiums are going up hundreds of dollars a month because of the Affordable Care Act subsidies not being extended. And everybody I talk to is having a hard time right now. Everyone in the United States I haven't talked to anybody recently, family, friends, who have been like, yeah, this economy is really great. Things are going much better now than they were a year ago. I haven't heard that from anybody. Even my cousin, whose business is doing well, said that there's all kinds of other problems now with importing stuff. So while his business is doing well, domestically, the cost of importing the T-shirts he screen prints and the other items he has to bring from abroad has skyrocketed. And supply chains are not really good anymore. The stuff with the post office, everything is making things harder for the average American. And I think that, this is all Trump can do, because it's the one thing he really does have a lot of control over directly is the foreign policy aspect. And I think Latin America is an extension of that. And yeah, it's clearly an extension of the U.S. imperial policies in Latin America. I agree also that these countries have been really, their entire infrastructures have been destroyed, decimated by American interference. They don't have their own identities. Their identities are dependent upon whatever the whims of the Americans in power are. Some of the more powerful regimes have been able to sort of get out of that sort of stranglehold. But as you said, the weaker regimes, poorer states in Latin and Central America are really, whoever's the president is going to determine what happens in those countries directly. And there's very little these countries can do about it. I don't know what the end result of Venezuela is going to be, but I sort of agree that I don't think it's going to, just collapse and then the Americans are going to get exactly what they want. Because I don't even know if they know what they want. And, I think that the longer this goes on, the more destabilizing it's going to be for the region. And, it's a really, really pointless endeavor and a waste of American resources. And that's all I can really comment on.
So there is a personal element to this. So the Cuban exiles who dream about reclaiming their estates still dreaming about reclaiming the estates of their fathers and grandfathers. How long? 65 years after the fact, are still dreaming about how to bring down the Cuban government. And they think that actually, if we deny them the oil they get from Venezuela, then we can bring them down. I know they espouse these dreams, but this is nonsense. Cuba weathered the collapse of the Soviet Union. So that's nonsense. These are their usual dreams.
Mhm.
And the fact that they are allowed to play these games tells you how much this is domestic politics. So the Propaganda Times, for example, says that part of this was to please a few Cuban Republican representatives in the House of Representatives because Trump needed their votes for a bill, which is laughable. But in the grand scheme of things, I think there is method to this madness. So yes, there is madness. There is very shoddy statecraft going on, but there is some order to this madness. So when the national security strategy talks about reasserting the Monroe Doctrine, and adding a Trump corollary to the doctrine, in addition to the previous Roosevelt corollary to the doctrine, what it really says is we don't want Chinese competition. So they don't want China, for example, buying Venezuelan oil. They don't want China doing business in Panama. Actually, the first thing Trump did was eject Chinese business from Panama. Actually, the strategy explicitly says that we do not want others controlling sensitive infrastructure in Latin America. And sensitive means anything that has money, as far as the US is concerned. So the US is actually saying this is ours and ours alone, and we will not allow others to get in here. And if others find a way to create a foothold, we're going to claim drugs or terrorism or oil or whatever crazy nonsense and go after their interests. The more strategic, larger point is this kind of behavior, even more than the text of the national security strategy, asserts a different way of handling the world. So, since the Second World War, or the aftermath of the Second World War, the US has framed the international order as a cooperative system that works through the United Nations to guarantee peace and security for everyone. What the strategy is saying, that's not the case anymore. It's just fiefdoms. So there are three major powers in the world. There is the US, there is China, there is Russia. Each one is going to be, we're going to assign it its fiefdom, and it should be happy there. And to begin with, Latin America is ours, and we share in everything else with everybody else. What they are doing in Venezuela is putting this in practice. And I think that is more damaging to the international order than the letter or the text of the strategy. And that's a good thing for humanity, because this order has been a curse to humanity. The United Nations order, the mutual security order, has been a curse to humanity. It's good to see it being shaken and shown to be just a cover for fiefdoms. The fiefdoms are not new. What is new is asserting them. And it's good. Let people wake up and realize where they are.
Yeah, but I don't know if people are going to wake up, though. That's the thing. I think that's an optimistic mindset. I think people might choose to go the UAE Bahrain route and sort of just join up with the forces of evil and see what they can sort of sneak out of it themselves and create their own little fiefdoms. And I think that that is a more likely scenario than some kind of mass revolt or revolution against the imperial U.S. Israeli-led international order. I really see that being the more logical scenario. That's my opinion. I don't see this wake up, this grand awakening, the great refusal, as Marcuse would call it, of the American hegemonic order. If anything, I just see more nations acting like the grifters you see on social media, knowing that they can fool the MAGA morons and make a quick buck if they can monetize their content fast enough while it's still hot and trendy. And I think that other nation states will follow this model, which probably means things are going to just get worse before they get better. I have a much more pessimistic take on this than you.
I don't object, but what I'm saying is the international order getting uglier and jungle-like is not actually a bad thing, because all what it does is it shows off its true nature under the nice words and the coloring of the United Nations of respect and mutual security. This colonial order has always been there, and it was asserting itself without coming out openly and saying it. Now it's coming out openly and saying it. So
I mean, that's nice for us. That's nice for academics, and we can say, we were right. It was all a scam from the start. But I don't see what that matters, though, because I don't see any of the nations in practice. I mean, like, I don't see any of the nation states doing anything about it. If anything, I see it actually possibly getting worse, Whereas the veneer of
Yes.
civility, the veneer of having to follow a certain set of norms and procedures, with that being lifted, now everybody can buy Trump a jet and get what they want. Now everybody can, lock up dissidents in their own countries who say things Trump doesn't like and get a cookie for it. Right? This is bad. I don't know. I don't see this going well in the medium to short term future.
The jail, the international mutual security order put humanity in, was never going to be opened through consent or mutual agreement. The only way it was going to collapse is if it breaks down. And it looks like its machinery is seizing. That is not good in the short term for those inside the jail. But
Yes.
the problem is the depth of misery the international order has put people in means that the only way out is through this bad bottleneck. I was smiling earlier because you mentioned the great empire of Bahrain. and, and that is, one of the amusing elements of this order. So now we see Bahrain doing political machinations in Somalia.
Yeah, it's really
It's
wild.
laughable.
I
But
mean,
there is actually sense to the madness. If you look structurally at Bahrain, Djibouti, and the thing in Somaliland, they have very similar structures. The only difference is Bahrain and Somaliland are artifacts of British colonialism, and Djibouti is an artifact of French colonialism. These are 19th century constructs that made it to the 21st century. So it makes sense that they would gang together.
I think we got it.
Okay.
all right.
Thank you, boys.
Thank you, guys.